I exposed an affair because it was affecting my sleep. So I'll start with understanding what I did wasn't exactly right, but I regret nothing. TLDR, my upstairs neighbor is having an affair and it's disrupting my sleep. So I found the wife online and messaged her. Problem solved. My upstairs neighbor has been having an affair with a married man for about 4 months now. I wouldn't care. But because it's an affair, he comes over at odd hours of the night and they have sex very loudly. I can hear a lot and it wakes me up, prevents me from sleeping. How do I know it's an affair? He's never spent the night and his car has baby car seats in there. Some backstory. I've had issues with my upstairs neighbor prior to this. She would throw parties on Monday nights. She gets home at 2 a.m. from work, pacing her condo and having loud phone conversations. She's 40 years old, throwing parties with 200 pro and having affairs and living like a teenager. I tried to talk to her like a normal person about my concerns, but she doesn't care and I've had to get the association involved to stop the parties. I hate her. So I decided to learn some more about this mystery man. I looked up the license plate, found an address, searched the address, and found a name. Took the name and did some social media stalking and found the man and his wife's profiles. I made a throwaway account. Messaged the wife about the affair. I haven't seen him now for a few weeks and I'm sleeping really nicely, smiley face. Edit, people asking, how did you find the address? Website called InfoTracer. Entitled Parker parked in my driveway, so I blocked them in and got drunk all weekend. Friday night I came home from work to find someone on our block was having a large party and someone decided they were entitled to park in my driveway. Keep in mind my driveway is a single car width lined with a retaining wall on both sides and a garage at the end. Essentially impossible for a tow truck to come pull them out without property damage. Seeing this and the lack of street parking, I took this as a cue to park right behind them in my driveway. Now a few hours go by and their entitled parker is now knocking at my door demanding I move my car so she can leave, seeing as they were demanding. I informed them that I had been drinking and would not move my car. The entitled parker then decides to call the police to get them to force me to move. When the police knocked on my door, I was sure to grab a beer from the fridge before I answered to talk to the officer. I had informed him that after I got home I was unwinding and had been drinking and was in no shape to drive. At this point their hands were tied because they couldn't tow her car out. I'm in no shape to drive and I'm legally parked in my driveway. I ended up telling the entitled parker that since it is a long weekend, I would be on a weekend-long bender and they could come move my car after I go to work on Tuesday. Embarrassed my dad's awful wife by pointing out facts. This was years ago. I was probably about 10. But it's still one of my favorite memories of this woman. My dad's wife has always been the definition of horrible stepmom. I met her as a toddler. And even at that age she would do everything she would to make me feel unwanted by talking crap about me and my family. She got worse over the years, not getting into it. But it was rough. She always had to make sure I knew I wasn't wanted. One day we were at a party filled with people I never met and they weren't family. I assume it was a co-workers or something. She had struck up a conversation and was bonding with someone new when I happened to hear her mention the number of kids she had. I corrected her and she had to backtrack and say she was talking about the kids she birthed. The lady she was talking to noped out of there so quick. It was hilarious. I got in trouble, but considering I'm still laughing to this day, super worth it. Messed up bully's life. In Asia, there's a concept of ragging in colleges. It's a form of hazing done by seniors on newcomers. People defend it by saying it's supposed to break the ice, but it's nothing but a form of humiliation and mental torture if not physical. Laws are trying to clamp it down, but the practice is still so widespread it's pretty much expected once you enter college life. It happened to me in college, and of all things the most humiliating part was them forcing me to dance in a lewd way. Was over in seconds, but the memory was just burning in my head for days and I couldn't get rid of it. I already knew from my college's history that reporting to them directly doesn't do jack the raw skiing is strictly banned. Well, the govt had made portals and helpline to report these things. That resource seemed untapped to me, so I officially filed a complaint and did my best to move on with my life. 10 years later, I came to know the police want to talk to me to close the case. I had forgotten about the whole thing, but now that something was happening, I wasn't willing to just drop it, so they made it to an official charge against the 4 perps. Turns out the boys were all working abroad, so am I, and got scared out of their minds on realizing there's an official charge against them. Working abroad requires visas, and all renewal forms have questions like, have you ever been charged? Doesn't matter if you were found innocent or guilty. You have to tick it yes. For countries with high immigration rates, that's a potential death sentence on your visas. Renewals can get rejected even if you have a solid explanation. One of the boys found and contacted me via social media begging me to take my complaint back. Offered me money. Too bad for him, I'm well-to-do. I informed this to the police in charge and he's in a deeper hole. As for me, seeing some semblance of justice was really cathartic and helped me actually heal instead of forgetting about it. Act like I don't exist. I 39 meters came from an Asian family. My father's parents lived with us for years throughout all the years. My grandmother, my father's mother, has always criticized, berated, and treated my mother poorly. Due to this and other reasons, my mother finally divorced my father when I was 19. I am introverted and was LC with my father and grandparents. I didn't have any ill feeling towards my father. I just was focused on school and still trying to figure out my future and career at the time. My mom eventually found someone that treats her well and remarried. My father evidently married someone in China, which I found out later. No idea when it happened. One day, my brother, 1.5 years younger than me, reached out and said that our father wanted to charter a fishing trip. I told my brother, cool. I'm down, as we used to enjoy fishing a lot as a family when we were younger. Unbeknownst to me, a 4th person joined us as we showed up for the charter. That is when I met my stepsister, no idea her age, but I am guessing 18, apparently. My brother knew and had met her before. Okay, whatever. Didn't care, just there to have fun fishing. In 2019, I was in Cali for my cousin's wedding. I get a call from my brother that our father had a stroke and passed away. I tried to get a flight back home. The wedding was the very next day. Both my mother and brother talked me into just staying where I am and returned the day after the wedding. I broke down when I first received the news, but kept myself in check throughout the entire time. I was still in Cali, so no one knew about the passing and not to ruin my cousin's wedding. I returned home, and the funeral was scheduled about 5 days later. There was a wake. My uncles and aunts showed up with my grandmother. I went to greet them. My grandmother completely ignored me. She spoke to my brother and made sure that I hear her saying that my younger brother is the oldest child of the family, pretty much insinuating that I don't exist or no longer part of the family. Then she was speaking to my stepsister and said that my stepsister and her mother was the only thing that made my father happy. Stepsister's mother was not there as she could not gain entry into the U.S. Grandmother also blamed my mother for her son's poor health and death. That comment made my blood boil, but I kept my mouth shut. On the day of the funeral, my grandmother was not there because it is ill omen for the parents to be at their children's funeral. In our culture, as I am told, the funeral director was placing the flowers that was purchased from the funeral home around the casket. My brother, mother, and I purchased a set to be placed on the casket. Well, there was a set of flowers on the casket, just wasn't ours. It had a different name on them. Apparently, my grandmother gave the funeral director specific order to remove our flowers and put the stepsister and her mother's flowers on the casket, not even placing the flowers with the rest that were purchased by other friends and family. It was completely removed. After the funeral, everyone was supposed to meet up at a restaurant for lunch. Well, after the stunt, my mother, stepfather, brother, sister-in-law, and I decided we were not going to join them. We went to a different restaurant without telling anyone else. We had discussed prior to the funeral about paying for the funeral between the three of us, but my mother said she would pay it all even though they had been divorced for about 15 years. We ended up not footing the bill. Fast forward to early this year. My youngest cousin was getting married. I was assigned to a table with the other cousins and their partners. My mother and her partner was assigned to the table with my uncles and aunts and grandmother. I went over to their table to talk to my uncles and aunts. I was standing talking to them. My aunt told me to sit down. There was an empty seat between one of my aunt and grandmother. I sat down in the seat facing towards my aunt as I was talking to her, but with my back towards my grandmother. Throughout the night, I never once acknowledged my grandmother. I found out later from my mother and stepfather that she tried to get my attention and was upset that I did not speak to her, act like I don't exist, and I will do the same. Edit. My mother's side of the family are all in California. My father's side are all in Texas.